I watched through the window as our moving truck idled at the entrance to our new home. The early afternoon sun glinting off the chrome bumpers and cardboard-strewn ramp. Joy surged in Mephnally. A fresh start in Maplewood Estates, but that exhilaration crashed against granite when I stepped onto the front porch and saw HOA Karen, arms crossed, flanked by two burly men in leather jackets. Their postures screamed intimidation as they blocked the driveway. Karen's lips curled into that smug, imperious smirk I'd grown to dread. I gripped the railing, heart pounding. My wife, Claire, stood beside me, wary smile faltering under Karen's unblinking gaze. Just then, the truck's driver honked once sharp as a warning shot. Karen raised a manicured finger, voice carrying like a sermon. This community has strict move-in protocols. No new residents may enter unless cleared by the HOA board. Step aside, or we'll be forced to take legal action. The burly men edged forward, expressions hard as granite. My blood roared, memories of sandy battlefields and hushed commands echoed in my mind. I'd served 2 tours overseas as a combat veteran. Intimidation was a language I spoke fluently, but my lips pressed into a thin line as I forced calm. I stepped down from the porch with deliberate slowness, phone in hand, tapping record. Neighbors, live from 14 Maplewood Lane. HOA Karen has hired her own private enforcers to block our move-in. Problem is, I'm a retired combat vet with zero patience for this crap. Let's see how she handles that. Cameras panned to Karen's face, its poise cracking. The burly men's brows furrowed at my tone, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Cleared my throat. Gentlemen, I said, voice low and even. Step aside for the property deed. I own this land outright. No covenant grants Karen or anyone else the right to obstruct my entrance. One thug spat, sleeve riding up to reveal a tattoo of barbed wire. But as I raised my phone screen to show a scanned copy of the deed, its embossed county seal and lot boundary lines, the men hesitated. The deed left no ambiguity. Parcel B12 was mine, with full move-in rights effective today. Karen's smirk slipped, replaced by a flicker of anger. She sputtered, "You can't just flaunt private property rights. We have bylaws." I took a step closer, activating the live mic. Bylaws you drafted unilaterally, without majority vote. Our HOA dissolved last year when 80% voted to exit. Show me the minutes that reinstate your authority. Her nails raked the clipboard for non-existent records. The live chat exploded. Go vet! Expose her! Then came the unforeseen twist. The distant rumble of sirens as Sheriff Morales' cruiser rolled in, lights flashing crimson and cobalt across the manicured lawns. The 2 burly men clenched their jaws as Deputy Morales emerged, badge gleaming. He approached the group and said calmly, "What's the situation here?" Karen, now trembling, recited her half-remembered bylaws. Morales held up the deed and the HOA dissolution certificate I'd handed him. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Karen, "this HOA has no legal authority to enforce move-in protocols. These gentlemen are trespassing on private property at your behest. Step aside and let the owners continue." Karen's face drained as the deputy motioned for the men to disperse. They muttered curses under their breath but relinquished their stances, stepping back. Karen, still clutching her clipboard, looked ready to faint under the weight of her own hysteria. Claire moved to my side, exhaling relief. I ended the live stream with a firm nod. Entitlement evaporates under command respect. Share your thoughts. Was this justice served? Or did we underplay our welcome? By nightfall, the moving truck had unloaded most of our belongings onto the porch, neighbors bringing over boxes and offering smiles where suspicion once reigned. Karen had retreated into her hedge-lined fortress, lips pressed into a thin line. In contrast, my street was alive with friendly chatter and the hum of polite conversation, evidence that hospitality trumps hostility. The next morning, I invited Sheriff Morales and Deputy Jenkins to join me at the community center, where we convened with board members to address the breakdown. I projected the deed and dissolution certificate onto the screen, then tapped the tablet to display a timeline of Karen's unauthorized citations and infractions over the past year. The room trembled with the weight of documented overreach. David's wage garnishment for phantom lawn violations, Mrs. Cho's citation for phantom holiday lights, and now my own move-in blockade. The sheriff leaned forward, voice grave. This isn't just bad policy, it's a pattern of harassment. We recommend immediate charter reform, board reshuffle, and an external audit of HOA funds. I nodded, grateful that my Delta Force-era insistence on operations transparency found new purpose in local governance. Tasked with drafting reforms, I spent afternoons at the center, working with Jackson and Mrs. Alvarez to outline new protocols. No enforcement action without majority board vote. Mandatory legal review of any citations. Prohibition on hiring private individuals for enforcement. And a transparent budget where all expenditures, including security fees, are publicly posted. Unexpectedly, we encountered a twist when one of the board's long-serving members, Mr. Thompson, confessed that he had quietly disagreed with Karen for months but lacked the courage to speak up, fearing social ostracism. His admission galvanized others. By the end of the week, we had a near-unanimous vote to strip Karen of enforcement privileges and place her on administrative leave pending a full hearing. Word of our reforms spread across social media, and by week's end, the local newspaper ran an editorial titled, "From Battlefield to Boardroom. Veteran Leads HOA Rebirth." The article praised our community-driven approach, quoting me, "Real leadership means protecting neighbors, not policing them." The piece concluded with a call to action. If your HOA struggles with overreach, remember Maplewood's example document, report, and reconstruct. Meanwhile, Karen, temporarily removed from her HOA position, issued a public apology on the community platform, a brief, halting statement that she lost sight of service and would seek guidance. Whether genuine or forced, her words marked the final crumbling of her self-imposed dominion. With my wife and neighbors, I organized the first annual Welcome Home block party to celebrate our refreshed covenant. The driveway transformed into an open courtyard. Picnic tables strewn with homemade dishes, children darting through sprinklers, and a small stage where local musicians played folk tunes. I stepped onto the makeshift platform, badge pinned to my chest, and addressed the gathered crowd. Tonight we welcome not just new homeowners, but a new era of community where authority is held accountable and all voices matter. Thank you for standing with us. Applause roared, drowning out the distant night traffic. That evening, as the party wound down and neighbors collected their lanterns and cooled pies, I walked to the edge of my property where a freshly painted wooden sign stood sentinel. "Welcome to Maplewood Estates, where home begins with respect." I paused to run my fingers over the carved letters, thinking of how far we'd come from the tense morning standoff with hired thugs. Over the next month, I collaborated with county officials to host HOA best practices workshops, sharing our blueprint for governance reform. Delegates from adjacent subdivisions attended, mapping out their own dissolution votes and drafting new charters inspired by ours. Teachers used our case study in civics classes, illustrating the power of citizenship and local oversight. As autumn leaves drifted over our rejuvenated neighborhood, I found myself once again at the bus stop, waiting to pick up Tommy after school. He hopped off the bus with a grin, chalk-drawn hopscotch squares still etched into the sidewalk, testament to freedom reclaimed. "Dad, can we draw a welcome mat for new neighbors?" he asked, bouncing slightly on his toes. I knelt to his level and ruffled his hair. "Absolutely, champ. Let's make em feel at home." I hit record on my phone once more, capturing his joy and the simple line of chalk leading from the street to the porch. Turning to the camera, I spoke softly. "A few good people, a bit of truth, and zero tolerance for bullying can rebuild any community. What happens in your neighborhood when entitlement meets resilience? Share your stories, because every canvas, every sidewalk, tells a story worth hearing." Then I swept my arm to show Maplewood Estates at sunset. Tranquil, welcoming, and more importantly, free of unwarranted tyranny. And with that, I stowed my phone, took my son's hand, and walked home together, ready to shape the next chapter of our story. Months later, I received an unexpected message from a neighboring community facing their own HOA strife. They'd heard of our Maplewood transformation and asked for guidance. I replied with an offer to host a virtual roundtable, sharing our steps from documenting infractions to drafting charter reforms. That afternoon, I logged onto Zoom alongside Jackson, Mrs. Alvarez, and Karen's successor as HOA president. We covered best practices, the importance of community consensus, and the need for regular policy reviews to prevent the kind of overreach we'd endured. Viewers from 3 states tuned in, asking questions about bylaws, conflict resolution, and maintaining neighborhood trust. Among the attendees was a young man named Luis from Evergreen Hills, who confessed he'd once been an enforcer for his HOA issuing tickets for mismatched mailbox flags before realizing how hollow his actions felt. Inspired by our story, he pledged to resign and work on community-building events instead. Hearing his transformation echoed our own journey, reminding me that change ripples outward, carried by courage and connection. Back in Maplewood, the weather turned crisp as fall deepened. I found myself on the porch one evening, notebook in hand, sketching ideas for our next community initiative, a quarterly Maplewood Mingle, where families could propose events, share feedback, and vote on neighborhood projects. Titan lay at my feet, ears flicking at distant sounds, ever on guard yet at ease in these peaceful surroundings. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a notification. A new petition filed by Karen herself, not to reclaim power, but to host a restoration retreat at the community center, an event inviting neighbors to share forgiveness stories and art projects inspired by our journey. I smiled, seeing in her overture the final note of reconciliation. I tapped share on the live feed. Neighbors, Karen is asking for a restorative gathering. Do you believe that accountability and forgiveness can coexist? Let's draw the line between justice and mercy together. Responses poured in, some cautious, some enthusiastic, but all reflecting the ongoing conversation that Maplewood had ignited. That community thrives when boundaries are clear, voices are heard, and even those who stumble can find a path back. As twilight deepened, I closed my notebook and stood, brushing dust from my jeans. The horizon glowed with promise, and I thought of Tommy's chalk mat, still faint but ever present at our threshold. In that quiet promise of new beginnings, I realized that entitlement may challenge us, but resilience, unity, and compassion redefine our homes. And with that, I turned off the camera, walked across the porch to my family, and prepared for the next chapter in a story that, like any good canvas, stayed forever open to color and light.